and the name of the American doll was Kit Kittredge. And Kit Kittredge was born also in 1934. So I wrote, Grandma Carole Hemler and Kit Kittredge, the American Girl doll, were both born in 1934. This is a story about what life was like back then and how they grew up. I was born on December the 20th, 1934 in Bartow, Florida. My mother and father and big brother had moved to Florida from Oklahoma. This was one of the worst economic times in the 20th century America, and the Great Depression, as it was called, was still affecting many American families. Unemployment was down to 22%.
Wow.
My family was doing all right. My mother was able to be a stay-at-home mom, and she was good at what she did, cooking, baking things from scratch, cleaning, ironing, sewing, doing arts and crafts. All this without any of our up-to-date refrigerators, washers, dryers, microwaves, electric can openers, or any other automatic appliances. There were no convenience foods or frozen items. Most grocery stores were owned and run by local families, and so there were few food store chains. A loaf of bread cost 8 cents, and a pound of hamburger meat was just 12 cents.
Wow.
And the average salary of a working man was around $1,600 a year.
A year?
A year.
Wow.
A new house cost $6,000. Franklin D. Roosevelt was the President of the United States of America, and he, along with Congress, established things like Social Security, aid to families with dependent children for the widows and the orphans, and many other programs for people to get financial help and jobs. There was record-setting weather that year. The dust storms of whirling red and black dirt swirled around the central states of Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Over 35 million acres of land were lost, disappeared in air. Oklahoma experienced a terrible drought with temperatures reaching a high of 117 degrees. No central air conditioning in those days. People sat around in their homes in their underwear and used paper fans to try to keep cool.
Wow.
But there were good times also. Yeah. Donald Duck, the Disney character, was first introduced, and the trampoline was invented. The musical Anything Goes, starring Ethel Merman, opened on Broadway, and Shirley Temple, at age 5, became a movie star in The Good Ship Lollipop. And Cole Porter continued to write musical hits. People still danced, went to movies, and listened to the radio. There was no television. Families would gather in the living room after dinner and listen together to the radio programs that the adults picked out, and children kept quiet and didn't complain. There were no reality stars like Kate and John or those we know so well from Survivor, but there were many famous gangsters such as Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, and Babyface Nelson. Some interesting names for criminals. And like so many, they were all eventually killed in gun battles with the authorities. Now, being born in December, I must confess, I was not aware of the above happenings, so I was content as a baby should be. Though my mother did tell the story of how I was dropped on my head, accidentally of course, by a babysitter while I was under the age of 1. The business in Florida closed, and my parents and brother and I returned to live in Oklahoma in 1935. We lived in a 3-bedroom home with 1 bath and a high back porch with steps leading down to the backyard and the unattached garage. My dad traveled for a coffee company, and my mother continued to work her magic in the kitchen and keep everything spotlessly clean. I remember when I was about 4 years old, my daddy swatted me with a fly swatter on my behind. He never spanked me again the rest of my life because he only had to look at me and I would start to cry. My daddy was the boss of the family and everyone knew that. As children, we didn't have a lot of toys. I remember being a dreamer and having a special friend. I remember pretending to be a school teacher and conducting classes with my dolls as students. I loved writing with chalk on a blackboard that hung on my bedroom wall, and I especially liked to read. For my birthday, I always got books, and also at Christmas time. By New Year's Day, I would have them all read. Nancy Drew mystery books were a favorite. We walked to school and rode buses to downtown. Children in the neighborhood would play kick the can or Rover, Red Rover, let so-and-so come over. We were very, very happy with what we had. Things were happening in the big wide world, but as children, we were not aware of political things, and many times we only saw the news at the Saturday movie matinees. It cost 10 cents to see a movie, a cartoon show, and the newsreel. Our parents didn't take us. We would walk the 4 or 6 blocks to get there, and we walked home. Everyone felt safe. But things were happening. There were men coming to power in different countries that wanted to take over other countries' freedoms. But America did not want to get involved in another war. America had fought in World War I, which was called the War to End All Wars, which of course it didn't. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese government ordered an attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and our world dramatically changed. As children, we became very patriotic. We did everything we could to help the adults with the war effort. Many things were no longer available and or were rationed. Things like sugar, coffee, meat, and gasoline. Most steel was used for military aircraft, guns, items for the war. So the rest of us did without cars or bicycles or things made from metal. We bought war bonds and saving stamps with our pennies and dimes. Almost everyone's family had someone serving in the war, and it was scary. But everyone was so thankful to have what they had, and most of all, they had family. Children were polite and respectful to adults, and especially those in authority. Older adults felt it was their duty to make sure children minded, even if they were not your parents. And as children, we tried our best to please. We had a 1938 Chevrolet that my daddy prayed would last through the war. Luckily, it did. My daddy was just old enough to miss the draft, so did not go into the military service. And by that time, my little sister was born in December of 1942. But I had uncles on both sides of my family who did serve, and one became a prisoner of war. His plane was shot down over Bulgaria, but he eventually was released and returned back home to the United States. My Uncle Jack was never quite the same after that. I remember loving school. We had art and drama classes. We had gym. I loved to skip to the music of Noah. I learned a lot about classical music in music class, listening to the William Tell Overture. I loved chasing the boys around during recess or perhaps playing soccer. I was in a Brownie Girl Scout troop and still know the special song that we sang. I've got something in my pocket that belongs across my face. I keep it very close to me in a very special place. I know you wouldn't guess it if you guessed a long, long while, so I'll take it out and put it on. It's a great big brownie smile. There are many more stories to tell and pictures with which to share. So for now, I'll simply say, I love you with all of my heart. Merry Christmas, my dearest ones.
Yes.
I think for people who were born at my